Nature is a profound and multifaceted concept, something that many approach with a mixture of fascination, respect, and sometimes mistrust. When we talk about trusting nature, the idea can seem almost romantic. The image of birds flying, bees pollinating flowers, mountains rising imposingly against the horizon, and clouds dancing in the sky. This is nature from the outside, a scene that we observe. But it's equally important to remember the nature within, which includes our own human essence, our impulses, instincts, and emotions. However, trusting nature does not mean that it is infallible. Nature, in its course, can surprise us with devastating events, unexpected storms, earthquakes, pandemics. It can knock us down with undeniable force, making it clear that trust is not the same as total security. This is the risk inherent in life. We live in a world where uncertainty is constant, and it is precisely this unpredictability that gives life its unique flavor. By accepting it, we learn to dance with the unknown. The alternative to trusting in nature is to live in total mistrust. But what does that really mean? A world without trust is a world where every element is rigidly controlled. This idea finds one of its darkest representations in the dystopia described by George Orwell in 1984. In this scenario, the totalitarian state allows no room for spontaneity or authentic expression. Everyone watches each other's backs, reporting to the government any thought or behavior that deviates from the standard. Imagine a society where you can't trust even your own motivations. People subjected to constant scrutiny, with psychological analysts recording every abnormal thought and reporting it to higher authorities. In this world, human relationships become artificial, governed by fear rather than empathy. What should be simple, such as an act of kindness or a moment of pleasure, is contaminated by bureaucratic concerns. This obsession with control is already partly reflected in aspects of modern life. In many institutions, it is clear that the preoccupation with recording and documentation often outweighs care for the very substance of the experience. Take universities, for example. Rather than focusing on the quality of teaching or the expansion of knowledge through a well-equipped library, the priority is often to ensure that administrative records are impeccable. In these institutions, student grade files are treated as precious assets protected in vaults, while academic infrastructure, such as laboratories or libraries, can be neglected. The irony is that by turning education into a system focused on credentials and certifications, we have forgotten the true purpose of a university: to teach and promote research. The academic organization itself reflects this inversion of priorities. The teaching staff, which should be the center of any academic institution, is often burdened with irrelevant administrative meetings and bureaucratic procedures that contribute little to learning or research. The administration, which should be a support for teachers and students, often takes the lead role, dictating rules that limit academic creativity. These trends are not exclusive to academia. In many areas of modern life, the process of documenting, regulating, and controlling surpasses experience itself. We have become so preoccupied with making sure the record books are in order that we forget to live the stories that really matter. This approach feeds a culture of fear and distrust, where spontaneity is replaced by rigid rules. However, the solution to this dilemma lies in learning to trust both the nature around us and our own inner nature. This trust must not be blind. It is important to recognize that mistakes and failures will be part of the process. However, trusting nature means accepting its unpredictability as an integral part of the human experience. By choosing to trust, we not only allow ourselves to live more fully, but we also reject the need for excessive control. This trust frees us from systems that stifle creativity and expression. It allows relationships to be built on empathy and mutual respect, rather than mistrust and fear. So the thinking is clear. The risk of trusting nature is infinitely less than the cost of trying to control it completely. As a society, we can choose to accept uncertainty and live joyfully, or we can lose ourselves in an endless cycle of surveillance and restriction. The choice is in our hands, and it is a decision that will shape not only the future, but also the quality of our lives in the present. The meaning of education and the role of schools have changed dramatically over time. The word scholar originally referred to a person dedicated to intellectual leisure, someone who didn't have to worry about the pressures of material survival. This concept was intertwined with the idea of a gentleman, a person who had sufficient income to devote to study and contemplation without the need to work. Education, in this sense, was a privilege that allowed one to explore knowledge for the pleasure of learning, investigating subjects that were not directly linked to survival or productivity. However, the modern model of education has turned into something diametrically opposed. Today, schools and universities are environments intensely focused on production and work. Instead of a place for intellectual leisure, they have become places where constant work and meeting deadlines are the priorities. The pressure to get to the end of the course or complete a program reflects a goal-oriented system where the main objective is to obtain a diploma that functions as an entry card to the job market. This utilitarian approach to education is a contradiction to the original meaning of study. At its core, education should be a search for understanding, an exploration of the unknown, and an appreciation for the charming irrelevancies of life, such as poetry, the arts, philosophy, and other fields not directly related to survival. The beauty of studying lies in its apparent lack of immediate purpose, something that today is often devalued in a world that idolizes productivity. The idea of leisure as an essential part of life has largely been lost. In the past, scholars understood that leisure was not a luxury, but a necessity for a meaningful life. If there is no room for play, life loses much of its value. However, there is a fundamental difference between playing for pure pleasure and playing for a hidden purpose. For example, if Jack plays just to function better later, he's not really playing. He's participating in a camouflaged form of work. True leisure is not utilitarian. It is an experience in itself. This concept is exemplified when we think of observing something as simple as a pebble on the beach. A person can pick it up and admire it simply for its intrinsic beauty. There is no need to justify this admiration with a higher purpose, such as the advancement of aesthetic understanding or any other rational pretext. Simply appreciating the pebble is enough. This kind of experience is deeply restorative. It's a way of reconnecting with the simplicity and beauty of the world without the filters imposed by the need to do something with every moment. The pressure to justify every action in terms of usefulness is a symptom of a society that has lost touch with the gratuitousness of being. When every moment must have a purpose, we end up becoming something like vultures, always seeking to extract some advantage or utility from everything. This perspective can erode our ability to be full and loving humans as it disconnects us from the here and now, where the true essence of life resides. The ancient Chinese understood this in a profound way. They had a word to describe this idea, wu-wei, which can be translated as not forcing or acting in harmony with the natural flow of things. This approach includes what they called purpose without purpose, a way of living that is not fixated on results, but on experiencing each moment to the full. This concept stands in stark contrast to the Western mentality, which often insists on measuring every effort in terms of results. It is necessary to recover this ability to live without being constantly obsessed with results. This doesn't mean ignoring responsibilities or abandoning goals. It means recognizing that life cannot be reduced to utilitarianism alone. Existence itself is a beautiful and fascinating phenomenon, and the ability to appreciate charming irrelevancies is what makes the human experience rich and meaningful. Therefore, the contemporary challenge is not just to survive or prosper economically, but to recover the spirit of leisure and gratuitousness that once defined the true meaning of education. This requires a change of perspective, a move away from the obsession with productivity, and a revaluation of simplicity, contemplation, and experience without immediate purpose. Because in the end, it is this purposelessness that can give us back a fuller, more authentic, and human life. The idea that something can be purposeless usually carries a negative connotation in the Western mindset. We say that something is a waste, a failure, or worthless when we can't find a clear justification for its existence or function. However, in other cultures, such as the Chinese, purposelessness is seen as a positive quality. It represents a natural state of being where things simply exist and flow without the need for imposed justification or purpose. Consider the waves of the sea crashing against the shore, coming and going incessantly without destination. To some, this may seem like just a repetitive movement with no meaning. However, this lack of purpose is what makes the movement so beautiful. It doesn't try to be something other than what it is. This is also the essence of many Zen teachings, which celebrate the apparent nothingness of things as a path to freedom. A great Zen master, for example, expressed this idea in his death poem. He said, "From bane to bane, I uttered meaningless things." This simple phrase carries remarkable depth. The bath represents both the beginning and the end of life. The former, where the baby is washed after birth, and the latter, where the body is prepared for burial. During all the time between these 2 points, he recognizes that what he said may not have had any purpose. But that's precisely the beauty of it, to live, to speak, to be. Not to achieve something, but just because that's what you do. Think also of the songs of a bird. Many say that singing is a way of attracting mates or marking territory. Although this is scientifically plausible, there is something deeper and more essential there. Isn't it possible that the song is also just an expression of the bird's very existence? A sound that, like the crashing of the waves, doesn't need a purpose to be appreciated? Speaking of which, if you're enjoying this reflection on simplicity and the essence of life, how about giving the video a like? It helps me bring you more content like this. And on that note, what do you think of the concept of something being purposeless? Do you agree that beauty can be found in things that simply are, with no clear purpose? Leave your opinion in the comments. I'd love to read and talk to you. Trying to reduce everything to a purpose can also disconnect us from the essence of life. Think about dancing. The aim of dancing is not to get somewhere specific in space. Nobody dances to cross a room as quickly as possible. Dancing is about the moment, about the experience. In the same way, music is a perfect example of something that doesn't need a destination. If the intention of a symphony was just to reach the last note, the best conductor would be the one who conducted it in the shortest possible time. But we know that's not the case. Music is meant to be experienced, note by note, without haste or expectation. In life, however, we often forget this. We grow up hearing that we must follow a purpose, discover a meaning, or fulfill a function. This can lead to an anxious existence where we are constantly trying to justify our own presence in the world. But what if we simply allowed life to be, like waves, like birdsong, like dance? This is exactly what the ancient Eastern teachings invite us to consider. They suggest that to embrace purposelessness is not to give up on life, but to accept it in its fullness. Stop trying to control or define everything, and instead live with lightness and curiosity. After all, it is in this freedom that we find true joy. The experience of getting lost with no intention of returning is an act of surrendering to the unpredictability and beauty of life. It's like walking in a forest without a map or destination, simply wandering, feeling the present. There is something deeply liberating about this practice. It reconnects us with the moment, with the simplicity of existing. There's a special charm in getting lost in these small, purposeless moments. Remember a day when you went for a walk, perhaps with a branch in your hand, touching logs, kicking pebbles, or simply allowing your mind to wander. In those moments, you were practicing true human rationality. You weren't looking for something specific. You were living the experience for its own sake, learning the art of not doing in the purest sense. Many of the most beautiful aspects of life are actually devoid of a single end. Take music, for example. The aim of a piece of music is not to get to the last note as quickly as possible. If that were the case, a symphony would be a race, and the best conductors would be those who finish the fastest. But we know that's not the case. Music is meant to be felt, note by note, moment by moment. The same applies to dance. Nobody dances to cross a room, but to feel each movement and each step as a full experience. This same principle can be applied to life. We often worry too much about finding a clear purpose for everything we do, as if our existence needed to be justified by concrete goals and objectives. But by incessantly searching for a destination, we lose the richness of the path. We live stuck in the future and forget that it is in the present that life really happens. This is a thought that goes back to various philosophical traditions, especially Eastern ones. Taoism's concept of wu-wei is particularly pertinent here. Translated as non-forcing, it describes a state of harmony with the natural flow of things. Rather than trying to shape or control every aspect of life, wu-wei invites us to allow life to happen, flowing like a river. It is in this spirit that many of the great thinkers found true wisdom. Lao Tzu, the author of the Tao Te Ching, talks about how nature loves and nurtures all things without trying to control them. This approach does not mean passivity, but a deep trust in the natural order of the universe. By trusting this flow, we avoid the exhaustion that comes from the constant need to impose our will on the world. This principle can also be observed in the way we relate to the nature around us. Imagine watching wild geese flying and disappearing into the clouds, or a ship disappearing behind a distant island. These moments have a peculiar charm because they don't offer us any answers or solutions. They simply are. By observing them, we are invited to relax and surrender to the simplicity of the moment. But what about you? How does it feel to simply observe life without trying to control it or find greater meaning in each moment? If this idea resonates with you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Share your experience and don't forget to like this video. Your interaction helps me bring you more reflections like this. In the modern world, we are often encouraged to think that every moment should be productive. This mentality can lead us to live in a constant state of pressure, where we forget that the simple pleasure of existing is, in itself, enough. By embracing the idea that we don't need to have a clear purpose all the time, we can rediscover joy in simple activities, such as walking aimlessly or simply contemplating a landscape. So the next time you feel the pressure to do something, ask yourself, is it really necessary? Or can you simply be present and allow life to flow around you? Remember, it is in letting go of control and surrendering to the moment that we often find the greatest forms of freedom and happiness. Life presents constant choices, and one of them is the decision whether or not to trust what surrounds us, nature, the unknown, and ultimately, ourselves. This trust, however, is not a guarantee of safety. It is a leap of faith that allows us to live fully even in the face of uncertainty. The phrase, "you have to draw a line somewhere," attributed to the creation of the universe, reflects the need for boundaries in order for something to happen. Without contrast, without light and dark, without good and evil, without beginning and end, there would be no movement and life would be static. These limits are not barriers to restrict us, but structures that give shape to the human experience. Choosing to trust is accepting that these limits exist, and that, even so, we are in a universe that does not have a supreme boss or an absolute controller. This lack of control is liberating. As Lao Tzu teaches in the Tao Te Ching, the Tao washes and nourishes all things, but does not dominate them. It is this approach of non-domination that allows us to live in harmony with the natural flow of life, rather than fighting against it. Think about how this applies to everyday situations. When we try to control every detail, whether at work, in relationships, or even in our thoughts, we end up creating tension and anxiety. It's like holding on to something so tightly that it slips through your fingers. Trust, on the other hand, is like letting the air out of your lungs after a long breath. It's relaxing into the rhythm of life, allowing it to flow without a constant need for interference. This approach doesn't mean neglect. When you trust, you also accept that there are mistakes and failures, but also that these moments are learning opportunities. For example, throwing an object, like the hypothetical scenario of throwing an ashtray, requires you to let go of the object. If you don't let go, it will never reach its destination. Life is exactly like that. You have to let go for it to happen. It is in this context that trust in the unknown becomes an act of courage and freedom. By letting go of control, you open yourself up to the infinite possibilities that exist outside your planning and expectations. It is in this space of surrender that we find the true potential of the human experience. What do you think about this? How do you view the idea of trusting in the natural flow of life, even in the face of uncertainty? If this reflection has brought you something new, leave a comment below, sharing your perspective. And don't forget to like this video. This simple gesture helps me to keep bringing you content that makes you think and reflect. Reinforcing what we've learned along this journey, we've seen that trusting nature, both external and internal, is an act of acceptance and freedom. The absence of purpose is not something negative, but an expression of the beauty and simplicity of life. Letting go of excessive control is essential to living fully, allowing life to flow with its imperfections and learning opportunities. Limits and contrasts shape our experience, but they shouldn't imprison us. If you think this message can help others, share this video with friends and family. Let's spread these ideas and create a world where we can live with more confidence, lightness, and meaning. Thank you very much for being here, and see you next time.